Hey, this is Mugluk, and this is my guide on how to play the Black Orc as a tank. First of all, this guide is a little bit long, so I'm gonna have some segments, including timestamps. Our list of topic is as following. I'm gonna go over spec, gear, that includes talisman, and tactics, morals. Then we're diving into guard mechanics, how to use guard properly, how to stat for it. We're gonna go over playstyle, that includes skills you want to use and how you're gonna want to use them. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about punt, and finally add-ons. So I'm gonna suggest add-ons and how to set them up to make your job as a guard tech easier. So first of all, the spec. You want to put points into Brawler tree. The reason being your stat debuff the biggest. The more points you have into the Brawler tree, the more points the biggest actually debuffs, and the more points it debuffs, the more damage you do. Because I have that many points in the tree, I get Not in the Face. It's a really good ability because it increases cooldowns on every skill by 5 seconds. That means if you put that on, say, a Rune Priest, he cannot use his flash heal for 5 seconds after he uses his once. Especially on enemies that are not prepared for it, they will often fumble and not do anything in the time. It also gives you immunity to stagger, knockdown, disarm or silence for 4 seconds. Then I'm gonna put points into Path of the Big Boss to get Big Brawlin. Big Brawlin changes Big Swing to also snare all targets by 40% for 5 seconds. It also increases their build-up times by 25%. With this tactic, your Big Swing does all in once. It decreases damage by reducing their strength, it reduces cast damage by increasing their build-up times, and it also snares them. Big Swing is spammable, that means you can keep the AoE snare up all the time, which you should try to do so. Alternative specs include getting Ya Miss Me, either by putting less points in Brawler, in which case you lose Not in the Face, or by getting rid of Big Sprawling, which I really don't recommend because I think the tactic is awesome. Let's talk a little bit about stats, what stats you want to get. So first of all are the base stats. Strength. You want to have strength so you can increase your chance not to get parried, so all your hits, especially your snares, get through. That also is somewhat true for punt. You're not the main punter as a Black Orc, so that's less of an importance. The second stat that's important is toughness. You want to have between 500 and 700 toughness. This directly changes how tanky you are in terms of raw damage you get, not guard damage. Weapon skill is not that important, mainly because you're not a DPS, so the armor reduction is viable for you, and the parry skill you get from weapon skill is negated by enemy strength. You want to have around 200 initiative, so that after an initiative debuff you don't get critted all the time. After you get debuffed slightly under 100, chance to be crit is between 30 and 40%, and if you get debuffed below 40, it's even higher at like roughly 80%. Finally, wounds is important because it's your life total. Anything from 600 to 700 is fine, even above that, but keep in mind that that's not damage you mitigate, it's just damage you like health you have, so that's just the total amount of damage you can take. Without mitigation, wounds is worthless. You want to use an armor potion at all times. I use strength potions for my offensive potion, because that's your main mitigation for all physical damage. Resists are usually kept in check with the Chosen, and block and parry you push by using all renome points, like put 10 into block, 10 into parry, and 10 into dodge disrupt. So parry and block are for guard damage and damage incoming to you, and dodge and disrupt is just for casters and shadow warriors. Crit and all that is basically ignore. So how does guard actually work? Well, first thing is really easy. It's just a circle around you, target is 30 feet. And that radius, target is when the radius guarded. Enough. So, how does the guard damage work? We have this goblin right here. Say you're guarding that goblin. He's getting attacked by a fire wizard. Note, fire wizard does magical damage. So, your fire wizard would say 1000 damage to your goblin. What your goblin actually receives is 500 damage. Or he can disrupt. If he takes damage, you take damage. Don't take damage based on your toughness. You take damage based on the goblin's toughness. So, if your goblin shaman takes 500 damage, you also take 500 damage. That means the squishier the target you guard, damage you get. So, you get 500 damage. This damage is not actually magical. You can parry it and you can block it. And it always is frontal, so you don't have to change your position to match the goblin. You can always parry attacks you guard and you can block them. You can't disrupt them and you can't dodge them. Is it relevant how much toughness you have? So this is actually why we use a shield. Shields have a block rate. The block rate determines how much percent block chance we get from it. The difference between guard block and usual block is that enemy strength reduces our block rate, so that by fighting regular enemies that are soft capped in strength, we only get around 6 to 7% block chance against them, without using Reno. However, if we are guarding, the full block rating applies and we get a much higher chance, even close to 40% for blocking the attacks. We enhance that further by putting all remount points we can offer into parry and block, summon to disrupt so we don't get melted by casters. The same thing applies to parry. Our full weapon skill gets applied, so all the parry bonus from weapon skill we get for guarding, it doesn't get reduced by enemies' strength. So basically, it's like we are fighting a paper doll when guarding. So let's go over each and every tactic and more, why I think you should use them and why I think you shouldn't use the others. So, small note, as tactics currently run good with shield, big, brawl and drugged. You can change that depending on what you find suits you best. I have another one. Theoretically, this tactic isn't as bad as it sounds. The damage isn't the big part, but every dot tick has a chance to proc your stat to drain the biggest. This makes it worthwhile considering when you need to proc the biggest, which is one of the main reasons why you want to take a Black Orc in the group. Big Brawler. I personally always use this tactic regardless of what build I have, because it allows you to snare AoE. This allows your melee DPS, your casters and your healers to be safe from enemy melees, or allows you to kite, allows your melee DPS to catch up when you're snaring casters, etc. Also, the disorient is not that bad. Bring him on is way too confusing for me to actually use. First of all, you can't predict when you parry, so more often than not it puts you in the best plan when you don't actually want to be in the best plan, say when you want to AoE snare. And second of all, it's not good enough to warrant using it as a tactic slot. For DPS Black Orcs that might be something to consider, because the high DPS abilities are in the best plan, but for your regular utility Black Orc you don't want to have that. Dose Grade is not a tactic I would recommend using. First of all, your armor debuff is the lowest value out of Blackguard, Marauder and Black Orc, so if you are grouped with a Blackguard or Marauder you don't want to use it. And second of all, the toughness reduced is already the job of the Marauder or the job of the Chosen Aura, so you don't actually need that. 10 seconds more on the armor debuff is completely useless because it's 20 seconds anyway. Don't bother me on, it's too niche for me to use. Focused offense, while having a nice DPS boost, also reduces your armor by way too much to be worthwhile using, even when you're running as a DPS Black Orc. Good with shield increases block by 10%, which is solid because it increases your block chance against casters and melee DPS, and also helps you mitigate guard damage. The biggest increases your wounds, which theoretically is nice, but I don't really like it on tanks that much because I prefer mitigation over overall health. If your wounds is very low, you can use it though. Looking for opportunity is a very strong tactic because removing morale can sometimes be key. If you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't ever take it. But if you ever run in a pre-made that has trouble fighting against certain morales, you can give it a try. Rugged increases your toughness by 150, which is nice because it's a decent amount of damage mitigation, although it doesn't help against guard damage. If your toughness is too low, just take it. Step you good is a DPS moral and that DPS tactic, and as a DPS tactic it really doesn't offer that much. Unstoppable Juggernaut is always preferred when you are snared all the time versus double snare comps, say an Iron Breaker and a Knight. So you can stay on target or stay with your guardie without being like dead weight all the time. You see me block that is a really strong way to get to Maw 3 really fast. The upside is that using Maw 3 is sometimes game changing. The downside is that it will give you much more morale than you can use. So say you're getting to Maw 3 within 15 to 20 seconds. You're gonna use your Maw 3 and then you have to wait a full minute before you can use it again. During all this time, you will be at full morale really fast, but you can't actually use it because you're still on cooldown. Regardless, if you want to use your Maw 3 a lot, this is the way to go. Champion's Challenge is the moral I would always use in a coordinated pre-mid. It allows you to cage a target. They can't break it with Focus Mind or any snare breaks, so it's a guaranteed kill if you're assisting properly and the enemy is not paying attention. Otherwise it requires heavy support like a guard tank and heavy healing. You also get rooted in place so you can't get knocked away. This gives the immovable debuff so you can AoE punt all other targets but the target you cage, although I wouldn't recommend that. Demolishing Strike is a moral armor debuff that also has a nice dot. I personally wouldn't use it because the utility is too low, but it's worth noting that the armor debuff stacks with other non-moral armor debuffs like Marauder, Yours, and Blackguards. Distracting Bellow is the only Maw 3 we have, so we're gonna use that. The damage decrease is ranged, so that means you can use it on a group of enemy Bright Wizards to reduce the incoming damage. Courtier Stabbing is what I use when I'm pugging, because it allows you to get a little bit more parry and dodge, and it's also for your whole group. And while Champion's Challenge is nice in a pre-made, in uncoordinated groups it rarely leads to a kill. Use Raise for high AoE situations. Shield Wall is the oh shit button for the Black Orc. I started using it a lot more recently and it's decent if you want to mitigate some damage. Note that it only blocks frontal damage, like regular block, so if you're using it on the retreat you have to turn around to actually get any benefit from it. It's worth noting that when your guardie is taking a lot of damage, so are you. So if your healer has trouble keeping both of you up, popping Shield Wall might alleviate some of the pressure because you're taking 0 guard damage. And finally, Walk Is Off is a moral 2 you can use alternatively to Shield Wall. It gives your whole group 140 toughness and it stacks with all non-moral toughness buffs. So I'm gonna go into the most skills that the Black Orc has and how to use them. Small disclaimer, in this video I actually run Race. That is not on purpose. I used it for a video before and just forgot to slot it out, because I know some guys will notice this and probably complain about it. So one of the important skills a tank has is Challenge. It reduces the damage of all affected enemies to 70% unless you 3 times than the debuff. That ability has a 30-second cooldown, lasts 15 seconds. If you run with 2 tanks, you can perfectly cycle it for a theoretical 100% uptime, which in reality never happens, but it's still a good way to mitigate a lot of damage. Second of all, Skull Thumper. As your Black Orc, always keep this ability up on enemy targets, so your DPS can hit them harder. Don't put it on every target, just get the ones that your team is focusing on. With the spec I'm using, you don't have much choices for the best plan anyway, so you might as well use Skull Thumper. Save Me Hide is also a good way to mitigate a lot of cast damage, but that doesn't happen too often in scenarios, but it's still nice to have when you need it. Obviously the toughness buffs doesn't stack with Chosen. Another really good skill is Big Swing. So what Big Swing does is it reduces the enemy strength by around 80, depending on how much you spec into the tree. If it also reduces build-up times by 25%, it increases build-up times, sorry. And if you spec the tactic, it snares all enemies for 40%, 5 seconds long. The ability has no cooldown and costs 50 action points, which is a lot, but the huge amount of stuff you get from it is just great. That's why I try to spam it as much as I can. You can not do anything wrong spamming unless you're breaking CC. The snare is absolutely spammable. That means you can keep it 100% up on all enemy targets, which is great for melee trains. If you're running in front of everybody to keep either snared so your team can catch up, etc. Also, AoE skills have a really good chance to trigger the biggest, because the biggest debuffs around 30 feet around the target, which means the more targets you hit, the more targets debuff, and the targets debuff everyone around them again. So if you AoE them, you get multiple triggers on the same target, if you're lucky. This is my flowchart on how to use AoE knockback of the Black Orc. As you can probably tell, this is not meant to be serious. On the other hand, you would do your team a favor if you would stick to this. AoE knockback gives the immovable debuff, which makes them against Champions Challenge, Roots, and backs that are more powerful than yours. If you want to put your target guard away from it, that knockback is not for that. Knockback is way too small to actually make a difference unless you punt the target from a cliff or similar. Punt is also not really useful if you want to punt people off of cliffs, because the punt is A, really short, and B, it's not single target, meaning that it also hits all the other targets that you don't want to punt down the edge. You should consider if it's worth punting your target down the cliff, but to give 4 or 5 other targets immunity. Your sorcerers will probably need the root when they're in danger, and if the target is root immune, they're gonna hate you. There are corner case situations in which I encourage you to use the Black Orc knockback. That includes if your Guardee is taking a lot of damage and is kiting away from the targets and you want to give him a little bit of breathing room. You can also use the knockback to punt enemies over small obstacles so they're blocked from healing, e.g. Temple of Morcane. Let's go into add-ons, and I know this will cause a lot of hate. And I don't personally like the add-on for what it does to the game, but nerf buttons is there and you might as well use it. For the Black Orc, it's really simple. You just put your 3 abilities in there for your rotation. And that's it. in that order. You can also use abilities with a cooldown in there, but you know, there are enough nerf buttons tutorials as it is. The reason for this is simple: you have a lot of abilities and your hot binds are limited. So if you want to have every ability bound to something useful, you either need a special mouse, you need to have big hands to reach a lot of keys, or you use different add-ons. Obviously, you can use it all using separate hotkeys for every ability, and if you want to do that, you can. But nerf buttons is there to help, and it's definitely a possibility. Although, like, half of the population of Return of Reckoning will hate you for it and say that you're a scrub, which I am. You can still use it. Other add-ons that have a similar functionality is Plan B. The issue for Plan B is that personally I found it to be lagging behind a lot. So if I used one ability and then changed the plan, it would often not actually work. It also dropped my FPS by quite a bit. Other add-ons are Guard Enhancement System, or GES, which is this small one here. It gives you a target indicator over the target in a color that shows a rough health percentage of the target. You can see it in the clip I just used. And finally, something I found really good is Buffhead. It just shows you debuffs from the target. That includes your debuffs, that includes the movable immunity and other stuff. And your Buffhead to show every important buff the enemy has. You can configure it as you like. I personally like to show things as confusing movement, or one that every enemy MDPS has. It makes them parry all your attacks, that includes snare, etc. I also show stuff like Sigil of Stigma. It makes them immune to snares, so you can't snare them and you can't root them. Other things I like is showing guard. I want to show every guard so I can see whether a target is guarded, and if it is, which tank, Ironbreaker, Swordmaster, or Knight actually guards it. There are many more things you can actually track, like heal debuffs, but I want to keep it to a minimum. And those are just the basic stuff I recommend for every tank. So here I'm gonna show you a few clips and explain what I did, why I did it, and like just so you can get the general flow of how to play the Black Orc. First of all, what you want to do is check your group. Basically, you always want to guard the melee DPS, and usually you should run with 2 tanks and 2 melee DPS. That means you guard one and the other tank guards the other one. Depending on who's freelancing, that one also tries to guard healers and whatever actually gets focused, while the other tank tries to stay within his within the main assist and stays with him all the time. Obviously everything can change when things go downhill. So in this group I'm the only tank, that means I have to guard everyone. When I see all the enemies pouring in, the first thing I'm gonna do is set the guard on the Sorc, because the Sorc can drop instantly. After I see that the Sorc is fine, after taking a little bit of damage, I switch the guard back to our main assist. You can always see the guard, this green thing. So I just assist on the main assist, get challenge up on everyone, and Skull Thumper on the target that's called assist. I also frequently use my assist macro down here to actually get the target my main assist is using. I always try to stay within range of my main assist and snare the blob, like here. I always watch out for where the enemy MDPS is and if they're actually attacking my backline, so I can react on that. If I see a good opportunity to punt, like so, I try to punt them down. Obviously the rotation is always keep snares up on everyone, keep Skull Thumper up on everyone. You're more of a supportive role than a general DPS, especially in a setup which has 3 DPS already. Here is a scenario in which we are retreating. First we try to kill the Slayer. He's almost dead, but then he gets heals. Note he has Ironbreaker guard on him. I see that he's not punt immune, so the second he moves to the edge and we start kiting, I try to punt him off. They are focusing my Marauder, but I haven't guarded. The punt moves me away from him, but I can come back in range, and I have the Slayer punted off. We try to go for the Witch Slayer, but at that point we just get overpowered by 2 groups versus us. We try to kite. I notice that the enemy DPS is on my dog and immediately switch guard to him.